Hi, today we'll be making Cuban bread for Cubanos. The recipe I developed and the techniques I'll be attempting to demonstrate were created by researching several authentic pan Cubano recipes and technique videos. In any case, we'll start by measuring our dry ingredients into a mixer bowl, or a regular bowl if you're not using a mixer. I'm using 682 grams, or 1.5 pounds of Canadian all-purpose flour here. It probably doesn't hugely matter what exact kind of flour you use as long as it is not hugely different in gluten content. Next we add a tablespoon of table salt, one of the only ingredients to not be measured in mass in this recipe. Now I personally know that my yeast is fine. However, you might want to proof your yeast, though it probably doesn't matter when you're using a full ounce. See that bag of white sugar on the right there? I've completely forgotten to add it to my mix, but you should definitely add 1 tablespoon of table sugar to your dry mix. I'm giving a quick optional hand mix here before I add the wet ingredients. I'm going to add 28 grams of shortening here, but to be completely authentic, you might want to add lard, and I'm sure bacon fat would be particularly delicious, and butter could work too. Here you can see me mess up with the water. I've had a pre-chilled pint of really cold water. Then I pour in some more water shortly after through a lapse of judgment. We'll see the result of that high hydration dough later, after we're done mixing. I'm going to be using a dough hook. You can use your hands, or whatever you want, as long as you knead this dough until it's quite smooth. If you are using the stand mixer, make sure you start it off quite low. You don't want flour to fly everywhere. This is after about 5 minutes of kneading. Mine probably will take a little longer than yours if you add the correct amount of water. Now I'm taking my dough out, and I'm going to knead it a little extra. This is just because I overhydrated my dough, and I felt that it was a little too sticky. So afterwards, I'm going to form it into a nice ball and let it proof for 30 minutes to an hour, until about doubled. Now we're going to gently degas the dough and let it rise again for the same amount of time, or until doubled again. Probably don't actually punch the dough like I did here. In addition to degassing, I'm also going to flip the dough and sort of give it a quick fold, but that's optional. Hey, it's the first transition I'm pretty proud of. Well, I guess that's doubled again. And now it's time to divide and shape our dough. Now I've been getting away with not greasing my baking mat until now, but it's stuck pretty bad at this point for some reason, even though the dough was otherwise pretty tacky. Basically here, I'm slightly forming my dough so it's a little less sticky, and weighing it, then dividing it into 4 equal pieces. Per the recipe, they should be about 10 ounces. As much as I was measuring the individual pieces here, I didn't really care if they were equal, so I was just sort of aiming between 9 and 11 ounces. Now, you'll probably want to cover up the pieces of dough you're working with some greased plastic wrap or a towel or something so it doesn't develop a skin, but since my dough's overhydrated, I wasn't extremely worried. Now, I got the technique for shaping these from watching videos of people making Cuban bread on YouTube, and it's a little different than I expected a sort of cylindrical bread to be made. Now, we start by rolling these out into sort of a cylinder and flattening them. But I'd recommend a rolling pin for this. Worked much better. You don't need to be as gentle with the dough as I am being here. We're trying to make it sort of an oblong 6 to 8 inch rectangle, about 3/8 of an inch thick, if I were guessing, but I didn't measure. Supposedly, rolling the dough out like this and then rolling it up tightly into a cylinder helps give the Cuban bread its sort of flattened torpedo appearance. Here I go checking the length of the loaf. Yep, it's bread. Well, you should aim for probably 10 to 12 inches or longer. Continue shaping the rest of the loaves, but you also might want to cover up the ones that you're done with so they also don't get a skin. You'll notice I ran out of parchment paper, and that's why I used this little strip here for the last loaf. Then I just decided to cover them with my extra sheet pans, but, you know, a tea towel, plastic wrap, anything will do to let them proof. On the stove I'm heating up an oven-safe skillet and some water so that I can have a source of steam for the loaves. This simulates steam-injected ovens at bakeries and will improve the loaves' finish and rise. You can see that the loaves have proofed, and now they're about double their initial width. I also scored them. This is immediately before going in the oven, which has been preheating at 375 since the loaves started proofing. So I fill my pan with the boiling water. I'm going to put it on the bottom of the rack, and then I'm going to quickly grab the loaves and toss them on top. Minutes later. Ah, look, it's still bread. Now, I also measured the temperature here, but here is the tap test on the bottom of the bread. Sounds hollow, right? Careful, it's pretty hot though. We're going to transfer them to a wire rack and let them cool while the other batch cooks. One thing to be careful with when you are scoring is that you don't squish more into the loaves. This next batch is a little lopsided because of that. I do top it up with a little extra steam, and then we go for another 15 minutes. The guidelines I use for temperature on a relatively unenriched loaf like this is about 195 to 198 Fahrenheit. If it were a more enriched loaf, I'd aim for about 200. If it were less, 195. Now I'm left with 4 perfect loaves of sandwich bread. Now I wonder what I could possibly do with that. Anyways, thanks for watching.